Omega really likes keeping their collections complicated. Take the Speedmaster, for example. There's the Speedmaster Moonwatch. There's also, though, the Speedmaster Moonwatch coaxials. There's the Speedmaster Racing. Then they've got the Speedmaster 57. That's pretty straightforward. They've got the Speedmaster Heritage, which is stuff like the 321. And then now they've got the Speedmaster Chronoscope, which used to be a DeVille. And the DeVille and Speedmaster collections used to be part of the Seamaster collection as well. Hi everyone and welcome to Shaluso, and yes, today we are talking about the new Speedmaster Chronoscope. Now this is actually the second new Speedmaster release of 2021. Remember at the beginning of the year we got the new Moonwatch. So needless to say, we're pretty lucky in terms of Speedmasters for 2021. Now before I get started, I'd love to know your opinions on what you guys think of the two new Speedmasters that came out this year. Which one do you prefer and why? Let me know in the comments below. But let's get right into the new model, the Speedmaster Chronoscope. Now, as always, we need to start out with a little bit of history, and Omega is one of those brands that really loves digging into its history, albeit they also kind of like to keep it complicated. If we look in more recent history, the Chronoscope name has actually been more associated with the DeVille line and a set of quirky chronographs that never really sold too well, but I actually really liked them. I almost bought one instead of my Seamaster when I was originally shopping around, but that's a story for another time. But if we go further back beyond that, the Chronoscope was essentially associated with a lot of the 30s and 40s vintage Omega chronographs, and one of its key features, which carried on to this new one, is the use of 3 different scales for measurement. So it had the tachymeter, which we're used to seeing on pretty much every chronograph. It had the telemeter, which is used to gauge distance. So the most common example is when you talk about stuff like thunder and lightning. When you hear the thunder, you start the chronograph, see the lightning, you stop it, then you can measure how far away it is. Or originally it was used actually to measure how far away artillery was on the battlefield. Then we have the pulsation scale, which you use to gauge your heartbeat, your pulse. This, in my view, is probably one of the most useful things still today, because I think most Omega owners don't find themselves under artillery fire that much. Chances are they're not timing race cars either, or if they are, they're using digital timers to be more accurate. Pulse is the one you can do really at any time. You don't need any special circumstances to measure it. So I'm really glad they included that in addition to the other 3, as well as the fact that they've included that historical styling. You'll see that they've changed the hands. Unfortunately, they're not loomed anymore. So these new leaf hands look great, however you can't really see them in the dark. And then also they've added numerals all around the scale instead of the normal batons that we're used to seeing on something like the Moonwatch. But the great thing about Omega is that they always have kind of one eye on the past, one eye on the future, and I think they strike some of the best mixes of leaning into history while still being very modern and up to date. And that of course reflects in the movement. However, unlike the Moonwatch, where they're very beholden to the 861 Lemania architecture, with this Chronoscope, since they're already kind of mixing and matching their history, they're not really committed to a particular movement architecture. So they've been able to use their 9900 caliber architecture in this new Chronoscope. Now this of course is their state-of-the-art chronograph featuring 2 barrels, silicone hairspring, fully META certified, coaxial escapement, and even the cool hour jumping function that comes very handy when you're traveling. And of course a vertical clutch column wheel chronograph with the hours and minutes concentrated on the same register, so you get that 2 register layout, very vintage, but without having to sacrifice how much time you can actually measure. They used that, however they kept it old school by giving it manual wind. And I think that's a great idea, because with a 60-hour power reserve, especially if this watch is part of a collection, in all likelihood you're going to be winding it anyway. So why does one need automatic? By doing that, they've been able to make this Speedmaster with one of their most modern movements only 12.8 millimeters thick. A little bit extra when you factor in the glass. By comparison, some of the Moon series that use the 9900 and the 9300s in their automatic form, those tend to measure around 16 millimeters. So it makes a big difference. This new Chronoscope, despite being 43 millimeters in diameter, is much closer in thickness to something like the Moonwatch or even a Daytona. So this is a great addition, I think, because they've been able to use their modern movement without compromising the thickness, which in my view was always the Achilles heel when it came to Omega chronographs, especially the modern one. In terms of variations, there's 3 steel variations. You have blue with silver subdials, you have a silver dial with blue accents including blued hands, and you also have a panda variant with a silver dial, black subdials, and red accents. And of course, they have a precious metal one using their new bronze gold. All of these available on bracelet or strap with the exception of the gold one. And the price of the steel one on the bracelet is $8,650 US. Pretty reasonable when you consider what you're getting and the company that it keeps. Because this notion of going back to sort of those pre-1950s styling cues for chronographs isn't new. Breitling actually did it earlier this year with their Premier 40, and both of them employed the notion of using one of their modern chronographs, making it a manual wind to sort of hark back to that history without really compromising on utility. There's actually something I suggested a while back for them to do on the Seamaster 300 to differentiate it from its other Seamaster brethren, as well as to make it a little bit thinner. Unfortunately, when they updated the Seamaster 300 this year, they didn't do that. They just changed a few aesthetic details. I still think that that would have been a prime candidate for going manual wind to make it slimmer, make it a bit more accurate towards the dimensions of a vintage watch, but what can you do? But I really love what they've done with this, as well as what Breitling did with the Premier when they released that earlier this year. I hope this is a direction that more companies go towards, making use of the fact that these days we don't really need automatics when you're talking about something that has a 70-hour power reserve, because most times in a rotation, you'll switch out before it runs out of power reserve anyway. Personally, I'd love to see other brands, for example, Tudor. I think they could easily go manual wind with their B01 equipped Black Bay Chrono, make it a lot slimmer, really lean into its vintage roots even more, or even Tag Heuer with the O2. That's a watch with 80 hours power reserve. They could easily go manual wind without compromising utility. That on a thinner Monaco, on a thinner Altavia re-release maybe, or on a thinner Carrera, all of those would be prime candidates. And of course it goes without saying, if Rolex wants to get on the party, they can as well. They have a 70-hour power reserve on the 4130, but let's be honest, they're probably unlikely to do that because Rolex is no fun. But anyway, let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this new Omega Speedmaster Chronoscope? Do you prefer this over the Moonwatch? They're two very different approaches to an old school but still modern Omega chronograph, so I'd love to know what your guys' thoughts are in the comments below. And also let me know, what other brand or model do you want to see going manual wind but with a modern movement, so it can lean into that vintage aspect but still have all the advantages of a modern movement. I'd love to see you guys' thoughts in the comments below. And of course, if you like this video, make sure you like it and share it. If you want to see more pictures and infographics of watches, make sure you follow me on Instagram at Shaluso. And if you want to see more videos about watches, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell as well so you know when the next video comes out. In any case, thanks for watching this video, and we'll catch you in the next one.